Okay, here we are again for another episode of the Jen and Sean Show. I'm joined by Jen.
Hi.
And myself, Sean. So today on today's episode. Yeah, well,
that's good.
This episode today, we're going to talk about whether the Australian snow season is out of reach for the common person. We're also going to talk about whether, climate change is impacting the Australian snow season. Jen's got some interesting ideas on that. And whether you can even bloody well afford it. Or whether you're better off effing off overseas in New Zealand or Japan. Jen, what we've got here in Australia at the moment is some amazing conditions of not the snow variety. Essentially, we're in September, it's 26 degrees today. The snow season lasted for maybe 6 weeks if we're lucky.
It wasn't great, no.
So to give you a bit of an overview, if you're not familiar with the Australian snow scene, essentially Australia has 5 main downhill resorts in Australia. Mostly 100% owned by a big USA resort conglomerate, Vail Resorts. They started their purchasing of Perisher in 2015. Hotham and Falls Creek followed in 2019. Typically, the Australian snow season lasts from late June to early October. We're currently in September, and it's pretty safe to say that the season's over. So it did close over the COVID apocalypse that we had here. The mountains in Australia aren't all that tall. They're between 1,500 and 2,200 metres in altitude, which is small in comparison to our cousins in New Zealand. The last big dump recorded, I think, was in 2019, and we've actually had the warmest winter since records started in 1910. So my co-host Jen has been snowboarding, or a snowboarding shredder, for several seasons, and while I'm getting back into it after a small lull of 20 years. Jen, is skiing, snowboarding in Australia a fluffy white playground for all, or a soggy, wet nightmare only for the well-heeled?
Ooh, okay. It's a little bit of both, depending on the time of year. Obviously, I'm not basing that on this current season, which has been, I'm going to say, the worst one that I've experienced so far.
Okay, and how many years is that?
Since the first time I went was in actually 93 in high school. That was actually a pretty bad season as well, now that I think of it. And more recently, 2013. So every year since that, excluding 20 and 21, when nobody was going. There's been some good seasons. There's been some really good riding. There's been some really decent falls. I've had years there where being there in September and you're thigh deep in fresh snow.
Yep.
On the same token, there's also been times such as this year where you're there in August and it's spring slush.
Okay. But there has been other seasons where it's been spring slush at this time of the year, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So there has been a lot of, I suppose, noise about climate and climate change affecting what we're looking at the moment, and it's safe to say that it is the hottest winter we've had since records began. Climate change?
I'm not a scientist. I don't know. I can only go on the information that's out there in the ethos, in the interwebs, all the rest of it. Looking at statistics and data, it seems to be that it does run in cycles. However, it would be remiss of me to think that there's no impact at all from what we've essentially been doing to the planet and the environment for as long as we've been on it. It's hard to say. I don't think it's the whole reason. I think it still runs in cycles, and I think we'll probably still see some good seasons again. If you're looking at overall temperature increases and things like that, then yes, there could be some compelling data to say that that's what's happening. I don't feel as though I'm enough of an expert on it to get out there and make a huge
we're far
call.
from experts. Let's be very clear about that. We're not experts. This is just solely our opinions. But yeah, look, I mean, I feel that climate change is a big factor for this. But the other large factor, which we're talking about today, is, well, is it worth, the common family or, the average family to go, okay, well, there's snow up on the hill. Let's get the kids together and go up for, 5 days up in the snow. Now, that sounds like an awesome pastime. People have been doing it in Australia since 1861. It was first established. And the first resort was established at Mount Buffalo in 1936. So Australians have been going to the snow for a long, long time, nearly 100 years. So looking at it now in 2023, is it actually affordable to go? So I did a breakdown of what it would look like for a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, to go to the snow, just purely off hiring all their gear, no discounts, no season passes, nothing like that. And then I compared it to if you did look at getting season passes and a few discounts as well, if you had your own gear, etc. Look, what it boils down to is that if you were to go to Mount Hotham, which is 4.5 hours northwest of Melbourne, if you were to drive there, spend 5 nights on snow, buy all your lift tickets, hire all your gear, chains, mountain pass, food, fuel, lessons for a couple of days, you're looking at in excess of $6,000.
Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of money.
It is. It really is.
So I think when you look at, okay, those that are powder hounds, those that really, invested in the snow, have bought their own gear, have looked at getting season passes, or what's called the Epic Pass these days. If you were to go and do that, your first week on snow, 5 days, accommodation, if you're off mountain, you had some of your own gear, you bought it either through Marketplace or Aldi, you bought your chains, you bought the season pass of the mountain pass, etc., you're still looking at, for your first 5 days, over $5,000.
Yeah. You got to love it.
You have to love it,
I
think, with this. I mean, that's a significant amount of money. Now, what's interesting, though, is that if you have all those discounts, your next 5 days would be significantly cheaper. When I say cheaper, air quotes, you're looking at just under $3,000 because you've already got tickets, you've got a lot of discounts that come with the Epic Pass. So it does get cheaper the more you go.
It does, and the initial outlay that you have as well. So if you're just starting out and think, I'll give this a go, that's where most of your expense is going to be. If you're hiring all your gear, you're outlaying probably to hire chains, accommodation, depending on where you want to stay as well. There's obviously ways that you can do that more cost effective than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
depending on the experience that you're after too.
You can stay at some of the lodges, which are like clubs up on the hill, and they're significantly cheaper than if you're going to, say, hire or rent out a room, for example. You can certainly get a lot of discounts there. We spent 5 days up a mountain, and we actually, while we travelled up and down the mountain, we stayed at the bottom of the hill, which halved our accommodation costs. We ate meals in the place that we stayed, but we also had a meal at the pub and a pizza place up on the hill. Look, we had the opportunity to crash with a friend on mountain, I think the week or two prior to that. So we stayed on their couch, essentially.
Yeah.
And that was great. That was fine for 2 days. We took in our own meals. It was very, very cheap. But we were staying on someone's couch.
Yeah, correct. And we'd still had the outlay for the vehicle access pass, because it doesn't really matter where you go, whether you're talking Victorian resorts, New South Wales resorts, it's within a national park. They're going to charge you to take your car in there. So you've got to cover that. There is the option to do day by day, but when you factor in how many times you're going to go, anything over about a week of doing that becomes cheaper to buy the season pass or the winter pass. And then you've got lift tickets and all that sort of stuff, which again, if you're doing, I think was it 5 days for the Epic Pass pays for itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Epic Pass is a season pass that covers multiple resorts. It also brings a lot of discounts and also half-price tickets for several days for kids or even adults, which gets you cheaper. And I factored that into my analysis, and that's where it starts getting a bit cheaper. But even when I added it all up, it still was over $5,000.
Yeah. If
you're crashing on someone's couch, yes, that's going to be a lot cheaper, but you're still looking at a lot of other overheads as well, particularly if you don't have your own gear and if you're looking for lessons. So, Look, at the end of the day, how would you sum it up, Jen? Would you feel that, okay, climate change aside, let's say that the snow seasons were going to go in cycles and there's going to be another one next year. Would you go again?
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Okay, but would you recommend it to the average family as a holiday destination?
It depends on what they're after. It depends, and I mean, it's the same thing in reverse. You might have people that want to go to Bali every year.
That's a really interesting point. I mean, I've never been to Bali.
I've never been to Bali either.
But I hear it's pretty cheap.
I have no desire to go to Bali because I'm not a fan of heat and humidity.
Yeah, that's understand. You melt into a puddle.
Yeah, I would. And I'm one of these weird people that loves being cold all the time. So for me, I would much prefer an alpine snow holiday than jumping on a plane to go to Bali. But when you actually break the cost down, it's probably a hell of a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
To get on a plane and go to Bali for 10 days than it is to go to the snow. I guess it just depends on what you're after. Personally, if I had to recommend it to someone, I would say, yeah, sure. But that's my bias in going, this is what I like to do.
Personal preference obviously comes into it, and the capacity to do that. I think the kids that we took to the snow got a lot out of it.
Yeah.
They had a lot of fun, hadn't done it before, so it was certainly a big novelty factor was there. And we had the, I suppose, funds because we'd saved for it and we'd planned fairly strategically, I guess, in order to get us there for that amount of time. My summary is it too far out for the common family? Absolutely. I think it's way too expensive. Yeah. When you compare what you can do, Bali, good example. But let's say you were into the snow. Look, I mean, what you could do, you could go to New Zealand. You could go over there where the lift tickets, from what I saw, were about half of the cost of Australia. Yes, you've got to factor in flights. Yes, you've got to factor in gear. But they don't have the mountain passes, the national park fees, what they have here. Look, I mean, if you went to Japan, the lift tickets again are under $100 per day.
It's so much more cost effective to do it in Japan when you're buying your tickets. Well, the Epic gives you, I think it was 5 days in Hakuba, and they added in Risatsu. So to do an extra day there was the equivalent of about $60 for a lift ticket for 1 day.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the season pass or the Epic pass here in Australia, if you buy that also gets you access to overseas resorts as well.
Yeah,
like
which is
Japan.
Their big selling point. So you've got resorts in the States, all of the Vail-owned stuff. They've included Whistler in that. You've now got, the two in Japan, so Hakuba and Risatsu. There's a whole bunch of other ones in there as well. They do have blackout dates, obviously, for your Vail resorts, the Colorado ones and things like that. So Christmas is a blackout date. It doesn't apply for that. They're big spend days, so they're not going to give it away for free, but pretty much anything else. And you get 10 days from memory for the US resorts.
Yeah.
So that covers Breckenridge, Vail in Colorado. I think Beaver Creek might be in there as well.
So it's safe to say, if you love the snow, if you've been going since 93 like you have, then you're going to go to these resorts probably regardless.
Yeah.
And, of snow conditions perhaps to a degree as well.
Well, you've got to take the good with the bad. It's one of those things that you can't, as much as, meteorologists would like to say, we know this and we know that, you're at the mercy of Mother Nature, basically. You don't know what the season's going to do. Which,
again, is a bit of a problem if you're doing it for a family of 4, 5 days on snow, and you want to get your best bang for buck. Booking ahead is a big thing.
Which you have to do to be able to get accommodation. And another big thing that's coming in now, which I read a lot about this year, particularly I noticed for Hotham, and that was the first time I've been up there, but a lot of those lodges and apartments and accommodations are now being Airbnb'd out.
Yep.
And the prices have gone through the roof. It's insane what some people will charge to stay up there for a week, whereas if you're looking at the New South Wales resorts, and again, speaking from experience, there's a motel, they call it, hotel motel, about 11 k's down the hill from the resort, and as part of the package there, they include full breakfast, full dinner every night. They've got a shuttle bus that runs you up and down the hill multiple times a day. And the cost of doing that, even in peak season, you could get away with a full week there for a full family for under $4,000.
Yeah, and look, we've met people that have stayed in caravan parks as well. Caravans or even tenting it to do it. So look, there are ways to make it a lot.
It just depends on
cheaper.
how comfortable you want to be.
Yeah, that's right. And look, I like a shower.
Yeah, I like a shower.
I like a bed.
I like a glass of red at the end of the day, being warm in front of the fire.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, the bottom line is, look, we're probably going to buy another Epic Pass for next season. We've already put the deposit down for that. We've earmarked to go overseas to use the current Epic Pass. Look, with the time that we've spent up on the hill already, the pass has paid for itself.
Yeah.
But with the limited season we've had, we're hoping for probably double that. It's fair to say.
Yep.
So that hasn't come yet. So the unpredictability now of the Australian snow season means that booking ahead is really fraught with danger. I think
it's a gamble, really.
It really is. So again, if you're a family of 4 with limited budget, or say $5,000, $6,000 that you're going to spend on a holiday, I think if you're weighing it all up and snow isn't your thing, you're probably not going to do it.
No. Unless you look at somewhere like NZ or overseas. I've known people that have done that for their first trip, booked in and taken the kids over to New Zealand, had a ball, loved it. Snow was great.
Yeah.
And it was on par. I think the flights were probably the most expensive thing, and they managed to get a pretty good deal on that. And obviously, if you've got, points with one of the major airlines that you can cash in for flights and things like that, it becomes more workable. The other thing with the NZ resorts is all the accommodation is off the mountain. So you're not dealing with exorbitant on snow pricing. Everything's off, and they shuttle up and back every day. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So look, bottom line, climate change having an effect. We probably sit on different sides of the fence about how much of an effect, but it is happening. In terms of affordability, I think if you're a powder hound, then there are ways that you're going to get onto snow slightly cheaper than if you just go as a one-off.
I've known people that park their cars up there and will sleep in their car.
Yeah,
for weeks on end, and have showers
if you're looking
in a
at it as an individual
building, and
I think if you're an individual, you could couch surf, you could stay in your car, you could make it
depends
as
on
cheap
how
as
hardcore
possible.
you want to get. There's ways around it, but again, if you're talking, average person and families particularly, obviously
Correct.
you're not going to be doing that when you've got kids with you.
No,
and you do want to be comfortable.
Yep. So look, at the end of the day, I think the Australian snow scene is too expensive. I think if you're going up for a day, it's a novelty. But
it's definitely increased in the last 10 years significantly, even down to the cost of the National Parks Pass, like your entry pass to get in. I was astounded at the cost of the one for Hotham this year, having previously bought one that covered New South Wales parks.
Well, that alone was nearly $500.
It was over $500.
$500.
Yeah.
Whereas if you did it for 5 days, it would cost you $225.
Yeah.
So,
and if you're doing a comparison from New South Wales, the Kosciuszko pass that you can get through there, they'll actually do a 3-year pass. I think the last time I got one of those was $180 for 3 years. So,
and I get you've got to look after the environment, the roads, and all the infrastructure up there, but it's a lot of money.
It is. I did see something today, though, that they're looking at can't remember the word they used on the email, but basically they want to consolidate all the Victorian resorts into one access pass. So they're looking at the possibility of basically you buy one pass and that will get you into all of the 6 resorts, which is a much better option. And if you were looking at that and they were charging $600, you'd think, okay, yeah, maybe, because then you can do Falls, you can do Buffalo, you can do Ball, wherever you want to go. You don't have to actually get a separate pass every time, whereas at the moment, if we wanted to do Falls, that's another entry pass up there, which then becomes like...
So it feels like it's got a ways to go, even though the US owners have bought these places prior to COVID.
Yeah, but
it doesn't seem like they've put a lot of money into it.
They're not
themselves.
buying it to lose money, though.
No, they're not.
The passes keep going up every year. Like on average, I'd say $50 a year. The Epic Pass has increased since they took over.
So just for shits and giggles, the Epic Pass cost us $850 a pop, or thereabouts. Look, you you can break it all down. It's all
Well,
up
it's gone
there.
up $100 then, because the latest one's going to be $9.49.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So it's not getting cheaper. So that whole, how much time you need to spend on the snow to get your money back is getting longer.
Yep.
But the seasons are getting shorter.
And they're getting busier.
Yeah, more people are going. I don't know how they're affording it.
Although I did notice again at Hotham, crowds were, and I don't know whether it was because it wasn't a great season or not, but crowds there much easier to deal with than Perisher crowds.
All right. Well, that's probably another one for another segment to do a resort by resort comparison. But at the end of the day, I think we've touched on a few things here. I think we can both agree that if you're just a one-off family going for 5 days, it's not affordable.
You'd have to really consider whether you were going to do that or, what else you wanted to do.
Yep. And that concludes our episode about going to the snow in Australia. If you're going to go, have fun, but also make sure you pack plenty of cash. Jen and I will be speaking to you again really soon about some more interesting things to do around Melbourne, but also in other states and even abroad. If you've got any questions or you want to contribute, check us out on the socials and of course like and subscribe. Thanks again.